You know, there has never been a better time to review our podcast, or any of your favourite podcasts, in fact. For every review you write, Podchaser is donating 25 pence to the Ukraine relief effort being made by the Disasters Emergency Committee. Leaving a review on Podchaser is free, but every review you write for one of our podcasts is actually worth a donation of 50 pence. Just click the link in our show notes or search for Happily Ever Teaching at podchaser.com. And don't forget to review our sister podcast too, Fables and Fairy Tales. That way you'll send even more to support the Ukraine relief efforts. Right now, though, it only remains for me to say the warmest of greetings to you. So, the warmest of greetings to you, and welcome to Happily Ever Teaching! This is the podcast to help you enthrall your learners in every subject under the sun using the best teaching method known to science, storytelling. To do this, we feature special guest educators who are passionately keen for your children to become amazing and successful human beings. I am storyteller Chip Cahoon, and with me today is...
Hi, I'm Toria Bono. I am a primary teacher in a junior school on the South Coast. I currently teach Year 4, and I'm also the host of the podcast Tiny Voice Talks. Lovely to be here.
Hi, I'm Helen. I'm a teacher in Buckinghamshire, currently teaching reception and Year 1 children.
And we're very pleased to have you, our listener, with us as we explore personal, social health and emotional education with a Colombian folktale. So for all the fun and effectiveness of story-led learning, let's don our finest hats, sprinkle some fairy dust, and hang tight to our magic carpet as we dive into this week's story. When a young girl wishes to marry a prince, she is of course overjoyed when her wish is granted. But her two older sisters become overjealous. So the scheming siblings contrive to be there when the new princess is about to give birth, ready to exact their revenge. Little do they know that their mischief could be about to let another wish come true. When the time came for the princess to give birth, she held the prince's hand and looked straight into his smiling eyes. So neither prince nor princess noticed the sisters take the baby before they could see it and swap it for a puppy. As the sisters passed her the puppy, the princess' eyes opened as wide as her gasping mouth, as did the prince's. They both thought the princess really had given birth to a baby dog. It was most unexpected. But still, they cared for the puppy, and cuddled the puppy, and gave it food and walks and a cot. After all, as far as they knew, the puppy was their child, so they loved it with all their hearts. As for their actual baby, the sisters placed him into a basket and sent him down the river. They weren't mean enough to kill him themselves, so they thought they'd let some crocodiles do that for them. Except the basket didn't get as far as any crocodile nest. It happened to float past the house of a gardener while his wife was hanging up their washing in the garden. And when the gardener's wife spotted it, she almost leapt as high as their house. She waded into the river to recover the basket and brought it straight to the kitchen where the gardener was finishing his breakfast.
"Husband,"
she cried,
"look, our wish has been granted."
And if you and your young learners want to see if the princess is ever reunited with her actual offspring, you can download our sister podcast, Fables and Fairy Tales, or search our website, epictales.co.uk, for Basket Babies. There you'll find a video of me telling the story that you can share with your children, and if you sign up as an Epic Educator, you'll also get a copy as an ebook or paperback, as well as the full audiobook for you to download at any time. There are even some tips for telling the story yourself, and a whole heap of resources to go with the lesson ideas we're about to discuss, as well as extra lesson ideas that we didn't have time to fit into this podcast. Right now, though, let's begin our discussion with Helen and Toria here by asking, folks, did you find this story to be a basket of goodies?
I found it to be utterly hilarious, if I'm honest.
Yeah, me too.
It just seemed to go from one bizarre notion to the next, then on to the next. And now this sounds a bit obscure, but I was having my nails done and reading it aloud to the person that was doing my nails, who was just in hysterics listening to the story. Because it just seems to go, you can't even predict where it's going. And when the stick appears, honestly, at that point, I was just creased up. So I don't know about you, Helen, but I thought it was just geniusly bizarre.
I was going to say something very similar. It was sort of bizarrely brilliant, this
you
story.
were having your nails done too?
It had, unfortunately not. My nails are very much of the pony-owning person variety. But if I were to have had my nails done, I'm sure I would have shared the story too. But no, I thought it was bizarre but brilliant. It had all the elements that I love in a story, especially the three really nasty sisters plotting, and then obviously the happily ever after that I always enjoy. But it was so funny. As you said, Tori, I didn't know what was going to come next.
No, you couldn't have predicted it. That's the great thing about this story. There's absolutely no way that you could have predicted at any point what was going to come next.
No, and I think you're both kind of hinting at some of the reasons why this is quite genuinely one of my favorite stories to tell. And I get asked a lot of the time, about my favorite story. And my answer is usually that it's the story that I'm telling in the moment, because I always feel you have to absolutely be 100% behind whichever story you are telling, so that your audience get behind whatever story you're telling. But whenever I am telling this story, I find that the easiest to do. And I think, Helen, you sort of brought up the fact that there are some very key storytelling tropes in this that we find a lot, like the wicked sisters, like the substitution, like the substitute parents as well. But they are toyed around with, and they don't quite go the way that you expect. And even though you've still got things happening sort of in threes, you're kind of left hanging right till the very end to find what's going to tie it all together at the end. Yeah. And of course, for me, one of the things that makes it a great story is the theme at its heart, which is the reason why we have picked it for exploring foster care fortnight with your children, which is coming up very, very soon. Because I do think that having children understand that stepmothers and foster carers and substitute parents are not always wicked, as they might go around thinking if their only experience is the ugly sisters of Cinderella or the wicked stepmother of Snow White. This is such an important fairy tale for reminding people that really family can extend beyond just blood relatives, and you can still be just as close and as much inspiration and important relationships with them.
I love that element of it, Chip. Actually, I've put for one of the ideas for later talking about families, and just the fact that this, at the heart of this story, is that family that's growing down the river, and that everyone's being embraced and taken in as part of the family and growing as part of the family. And we've just got that sort of contrast with the sneaky wickedness that might be going on the other end of the river. But down one end of the river, you've got this lovely family growing and such warmth and happiness.
Yeah. The moral isn't particularly hidden in the story, is it? It's kind of put out there very, very overtly. If you help others, they'll help you. But it does take a long time to perhaps realize exactly how and where that's happening in the story. Did you detect any other morals going on, or other, I suppose we'd call them PSHE lessons going on, wouldn't we?
Something that I found really interesting throughout was actually, in a sense, unpicking what makes us happy. Because the sisters were determined to destroy the princess's happiness. from the get-go. As soon as she married the prince, they were determined, we're going to demolish her happiness. And actually, they tried so hard, but nothing actually destroyed her happiness.
That's a good point, yeah.
You know, and this is one of the things I thought about for a PSHE lesson. Actually, what is happiness? You know, is happiness something that we get from things? You know, what brings happiness? Is it something that we get through some things, or is it just a sense of being? And actually, I'm really interested. I'd be interested with children about unpicking what makes them happy. You know, do they need things around them to be happy? Do they need people around them? Do they need, you know? And I thought every time something awful happened to the princess, or that I would perceive to be awful, she didn't embrace it with any sense of unease. She just embraced it with a sense of happiness and just felt so grateful for all that she had.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've never really thought that deeply about it, but that would be a lovely one to go into, and asking children as well what they think the phrase "happily ever after" means, because I think you both used it there, and about the ending of this story, and yet one of the things that inspired me to tag on those little things about what the dog did next and what the kitten and the stick did next, was because, when you get to the end of a story, kids are often so in love with the characters that they want to go on and tell a sequel or, have another adventure. And even Disney are guilty of this, because they'll do the happily ever after and then they'll chuck out a Cinderella 2 straight to VHS as it was in my day, or straight to DVD as it is now. So people want to stick around with the characters. So what does happily ever after actually mean?
There's a really good link with the start of the story there, isn't there? Because with the wishes and what would you wish for?
Yeah.
And the third sister wishes to marry a prince, but is that what's making her happy in the end? Because quite often there's that cliche, isn't there? Marry a prince, become a princess or a queen, and you'll be happy. And I guess the other sisters are jealous because they think she's got it all because she's a princess. But as you said, Tori, that's not necessarily what makes her happy in the end. I think that's a really interesting thing to explore.
What I found interesting about the 3 wishes was that the princess didn't give a reason why she wanted to marry the prince. And I don't know whether that was done on purpose or not. But the elder sister wanted to marry a builder because she wanted the most exquisite house in the town. The second sister wanted to marry a fisherman because she always wanted food on her table. The third sister just wanted to marry a prince. But it gave no reason as to why. So, and I wondered, well, why did she want to marry a prince? Was it that she wanted the title princess? Was it because she wanted worldly riches? But actually, as you go through the story and unpick her and her character, there's a real understanding of actually those weren't things that she was terribly interested in.
Maybe she had just read all of the stories saying that if you marry a prince, you'll be happily ever after.
Happily ever after, yeah.
It was that thought that got her through all of the weird and bizarre things that happened later on in the tale.
Or maybe she just bumped into him in the local village, fell madly and passionately in love and thought, that's who I need to marry.
That's almost a whole other discussion, isn't it? That you could have, particularly with younger children. Often, she'll talk about what do you want to. I had a discussion with the class not long ago. What do you want to be? And some of the girls said, we want to be a princess. So it'd be interesting just to ask them, why? Why do you want to be? Why do you want to marry? Why? And just see if they actually come up with a reason. Or that would be interesting.
Well, I think with older children, often at the moment, what do you want to be? I want to be an Instagrammer. I want to be a YouTuber. But why? Why do you want to be that? What is it that you want? Is it fame? Is it money? What is it? I don't know if children have unpicked it that deeply. I don't know if we unpick it that deeply. What do you want to be when you grow up? I personally wanted to be a brain surgeon at one point till I realised I didn't like the sight of blood.
Yeah, that's going to be something that definitely turns you off or makes it difficult anyway. And we do have another story that we've looked at, very similar concept. I think you were with us, Helen, weren't you, when we looked at Huff McTuff, the story about the princess and the giant. And she is a princess and she's wanting to go out and do things with people and do little odd jobs around the castle, and she's not allowed. because she's a princess.
I think that rings
And
well.
it's sort of
Yeah.
letting people, letting children see the limitations that they get with their desires. And I'm sure there are limitations to being an Instagrammer and a YouTuber that children maybe don't know or don't think of.
Yeah.
So, are there any other PSHE activities then that we can find in this story for? Let's start at the lower end of the school and work our way up. So 4 to 7-year-olds, that's where we'll start with you, Helen. Have you any activities for that age range?
And actually, it follows on really quite nicely from what we've just been talking about, because I thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk about what do children want to be. I looked at it from a slightly different angle. At the start, when the sisters are making their wishes, and the first sister wants a builder husband, is that the right order?
That's right.
To live in the finest house, and the second sister wants a fisherman husband to eat the finest food. I thought that'd be a good opportunity to talk about, jobs. You could almost retell that first part of the story and say to the children, who would you like to marry? What skills would you like them to have? Your husband or your wife to have? What? And use that is a very early years kind of topic that's often done is people who help us, jobs that people do. So I thought that would be a good way to discuss that. Open up that start of the story to some other wishes. There's more wishes. So who else could we wish for, and what would their role be? You could do, as usual, you could do some role play with it. You could even, if you had a bit more time, you could get some different people in from the community that do different jobs, and explore it from that angle as well. So that was one of the thoughts that I had, which linked nicely into what
if you could get a princess in.
It would be marvelous if you could get a princess in, an actual real princess that doesn't necessarily wear frocks. That would be good, actually, if you get an actual princess in. This is what an actual princess is.
You can definitely write to them, can't you? And
yes.
They do reply. I mean, they may not reply personally. They may have a team doing it for them. But,
they may not reply to every letter.
But yeah, if you write to the royals, and I know this from personal experience, you do get a reply back. So it's definitely something that's worth doing with your children.
I think my children would love doing that. I'm definitely magpieing that idea. And then a couple of other sort of PSHE activities. Or even just discussions. Some of them are more just a chat, I think, but they're worth dropping in there. So it was slightly bizarre, obviously, in the story that the princess, as it were, gives birth to a puppy, a kitten, and a stick. And as Tori was saying earlier about how the princess just sort of rolls with it, she includes everyone. And I thought this was a really good theme of the story, was just including everyone, whether it's the princess including her unexpected puppy, kitten, and stick, and just embracing them as part of the family, and not minding that they maybe weren't quite what she expected. Or it's the couple at the end of the river just embracing everyone that comes their way. I think that's a lovely theme of the story, sort of that inclusion and letting everyone be involved. And it's something we talk about a lot in primary schools, including everybody and differences. And I thought that was quite a nice way into it, because this is such a great story for families, as we were talking about, for the idea that a family isn't necessarily one specific way. A family, there's lots of different families take different forms, and I think this is a wonderful story for discussing different children's families, and a great opportunity for those children that may be looked after, maybe adopted, to actually maybe talk about it a bit in their class and those experiences. And you could do all kinds of things about families. I've done before, you can get families to send in photos, family photographs, for the children to then talk about. And then they can do some artwork of their own family in sort of a frame to go up on the wall. And that's really special to the children, because then it brings home into the classroom, and they sort of can often talk about the pictures that are on the wall.
I mean, we do that so much when we go off to our own offices. We have little pictures of our family there to help us get through the day. And well, why can't we let our children have those sorts of things to get through their school day? I think that's a beautiful idea. Yeah,
absolutely. The children really like it, and then you can take it as far as you like. You can include some artwork. Do some sort of painted portraits, as in the style of some family, maybe more. I was in a country house the other day, the family portraits that go on the wall. You could do something in the style of those if you were so inclined. But you can take this idea of families quite far.
Yeah. And I think, again, coming back to the fact that foster care fortnight is on the horizon, it's so useful to have that discussion with this story, and to have that discussion with your children. Because I think when you are in foster care, you're sort of not quite adopted, you're not quite in a step home, and you can end up moving from one family to another quite often because, the families don't feel like they fit. And I do wonder if part of that is because there is this pervasive idea in society that there's something wrong about being with parents who aren't actually your parents, which, we do find a lot in fairy tales. And being able to have a tale like this to put the total counterpoint to that view could be really, really beneficial to children who are going through the experience of foster care, because we don't often think about it from the child's point of view. And I think this is a fantastic way to explore that.
Definitely, you could use those the idea of those 3 babies going down the stream, and then when they arrive at their new home, what's it like for them? How do they feel? What's that experience like for them? And how do their new mum and dad help them to feel at home? And what's home like for them then? So it's a fantastic story for that.
How would you explore those sorts of themes with the older ages then, Toria, as we go up to 7 to 11?
Well, connecting on from what Helen was saying, actually, the whole thing about family, I think is really important. And I'd be really interested, first of all, in creating a family tree based on the story.
Oh.
So what makes up the families in the story? Because actually there's a real complexity about who belongs to who and so on. And actually, where do you place the 2 princes and princesses that were born and yet ended up with the gardener and his wife? And, then you've got the stick, the puppy and the kitten. And I'd be really interested
in a literal family tree in there.
Yeah. Yes, literally. So creating that, and I think that would lend to quite a lot of talk about the relationships within, and then children creating their own family tree. Because I think when children create their own family tree, they begin to get a greater understanding of their own heritage. I think with year 6s, year 5, year 6s, you could really take it back to grandparents per se. But I also think really interesting discussions can come up from this regarding step siblings, half siblings, being adopted and being fostered, and actually what those family trees may look like. Because I think, we live in a very, very diverse society, and one in which 50 years ago, we'd have expected a family tree to look pretty simple as such.
Yeah, pretty tree-like.
Yeah.
The complexities nowadays are immense. I have taught children who have had many step and half siblings. I've taught foster children. I've taught adopted children. And the thing is that in order to create our own identity, we need to know where we come from. We need to know who we are. And in a sense, creating a family tree, I think, would enable children to do that, but would also enable them to talk a bit about it. If they so chose. And what I have found is whenever I've done something like that, children have wanted to talk about it. But I think it would have to be done in a very careful manner, in which it would be, you don't need to share your family tree. This is your family tree. It's up to you whether you want to talk about it, you want to share it. Because I think sometimes children don't want to.
Giving them that knowledge that they don't have to share it. Would probably help them to almost take on the activity more, to actually get more out of that, to hold back less if they know that they don't have to talk about it if they don't want to. I think sometimes it's really important. I think I've taught very young children to much older children, and what I've found is that as you go up the age ranges, they become more aware of their peers and more conscious of wanting to fit in per se and not stand out. And something like, and our family trees are very personal because they're going to look different from everyone else's family tree. And that's why I think, some children will be very keen to talk about it, but others won't want to.
I wonder, a couple of ideas have popped into my head listening to you bring up this idea, Toria, which one of them was to think about how we take on characteristics from other members of our family. And I wondered whether you could encourage your children to have a look at the various people on their family tree, the ones that they know well enough to be able to say a quality about them that they really like. So they can think of, what positive qualities do they see in their mother or in their father, their grandma, their uncles, their aunties, etc. And then pick which of those they want to take into themselves.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
And as you sort of expanded on Toria's idea, Helen, I wondered as well whether, I don't know, do you think it would be dangerous to turn it into a friendship tree and actually have children starting to link themselves by their friendships, both within and without the school, maybe across classes, maybe friends that they have, coming to visit them back at home? I can see a little danger there if you have any children who maybe do feel isolated in your classroom, but I can also see this as potentially positive for them if they do have friends at home or if they have family members that they see at home, so that others are able to look and see that their tree is just as big once they start including friends from outside of the school.
One of the things that we do in year 4 for PSHE is we actually really look at people who influence us, people in our lives and so on, people that we go to, including, so if children are members of scout groups or guide groups, actually the leaders there tend to be quite influential in their lives. So it's not just about friendships per se, but also who is it? Who influences us in our life? Who do we go to? And I think the interesting thing there is that it isn't necessarily always family that we go to. There are external forces, which I think is what you're alluding to, Chip.
Yeah. And so a kind of influence tree almost as an extended activity.
And if you bring it back to the story, would you have gone to the sisters?
Yes. Would you have wanted to include part of their quality in yours?
As we're sort of talking about extended families, often what's really lovely is if children can have those other adults in their lives that aren't actually their family, but are so influential on them and mean that much to them, that they're given a chance to actually think about that and include them on a family tree, because maybe even children that maybe don't have good relationships with their parents, but they have influences from all these other adults around them. Even a few years ago, I taught a little girl whose mum had very sadly died when she was 3 years old. Her aunt had a huge role in her life. Her aunt was supporting her dad, and her aunt brought her to school and picked her up. And just think about those adults as well that children might include as their close family, whether it's aunts or friends or anyone that's around. And so that would be a really, really good way for children to actually see that their family goes beyond maybe their house.
Yeah, and I think we do actually do this even in general day-to-day life sometimes without even thinking about it, because we may have friends who become the aunts and uncles to our children. Our children end up calling them Auntie. Well, I'm actually Auntie Chip to the son of a couple of friends of ours. So I think this is a brilliant activity. Thank you so much, folks. That's all we have time for today, folks. If you try out any of these ideas, or if you'd like us to help you teach a topic you are soon to cover with your young learners, let us know on social media using @TeachHappily, or leave us a review using your favourite podcast app. Please also share this podcast with your colleagues and help us start a story-led revolution in classrooms around the world, so children everywhere can learn in a way that's effective, memorable and enjoyable all at the same time. Tomorrow, the gardener and his family will help us teach English. But right now, it only remains for us to say cheerio, and we hope to hear your story soon. So, cheerio! And we hope to hear your story soon. You know, there has never been a better time to review our podcast, or any of your favourite podcasts in fact. For every review you write, Podchaser is donating 25 pence to the Ukraine relief effort being made by the Disasters Emergency Committee. Leaving a review on Podchaser is free, but every review you write for one of our podcasts is actually worth a donation of 50 pence. Just click the link in our show notes or search for Happily Ever Teaching at podchaser.com. And don't forget to review our sister podcast too, Fables and Fairy Tales. That way you'll send even more to support the Ukraine relief efforts. Thank you ever so much.